My name is Rob Moffat. I'm the Chief Architect at FINOS. Peter got to my slides and added the stars and yes, I'm the Chief Architect at FINOS, and I work with these guys on the Open Source Readiness project quite consistently over the last few years, really. I'm going to hand to them to introduce themselves quickly before we get cracking properly.
Okay. Hi, I am Brittany Istenes. I am an open source strategist, and I currently work at Fannie Mae. I don't know. I do a lot of stuff. I'm a FINOS ambassador, to-do group steering committee member, and I'm just really passionate about open source and community and things.
Hi, Peter Smulovics, distinguished engineer at Morgan Stanley. I'm involved in the TOC, the Technical Oversight Committee. I'm an ambassador. I am leading 3 different SIG groups and involved in 4 other groups. So yeah, I am FINOS all over.
You really had to make me go after these two. So I'm Elspeth Minty. I'm a managing director at RBC Capital Markets. I'm also part of the Technical Oversight Committee at FINOS, and also been involved in the OSR SIG as well. And that's it.
Yeah, so hold on to your microphone, because I think this is kind of like an OSR SIG talk, isn't it?
I think it's an OSR reunion.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So for the benefit of probably at least half of this audience, do you want to just explain what OSR is, what the point of it is, and what we've been trying to do with it?
Sure. So open source readiness is about helping institutions get comfortable and get ready to use open source. We have all got the same questions about, can we explain why open source is important? Can we put value around why open source is important? And what are the right processes to put in place? And there was the realization at FINOS that every single one of the banks were having the same conversations and putting in place the same processes. So OSR is really there to help centralize the information that we need in order to do this. It's really been a collaboration between a number of different institutions coming in at different times. So I know when RBC was starting up its OSPO, we got involved in the open source readiness SIG and just learned a lot about what other banks were doing and some of the value propositions that there are for open source. A very valuable resource.
Yeah, and Peter, do you want to explain some of the things that the OSR SIG has done? What have we produced?
Wow, a lot. So we have a website, osr.finos.org, which contains a lot of the documents. So when I say documents, it's like a hand waving in this sense. So we have like 5 different strategic level, how a company might be involved, how to move from each strategic level. We have a maturity assessment that you can do and export from the website. We have a lot of presentations we have done before, exported there either as video or as PDFs and so on the website. We have all the information about our monthly call. We have all the information about the different tooling we have created. We recently got merged with the inner source SIG, which was focusing on the inner source technologies. Yep, you will talk about that more. So we have a lot of information about now the inner sourcing as well. So it's a growing content that we do have on the website. Oh, and we talk a lot about our training and certifications that you can take in this area that Rob has written with the help of some of us. Yeah. So yeah, you can learn about the certifications, the exams you can take as part of the Linux Foundation credits and so on.
And Brittany, you're on the OSR booth today, right?
I am. Yeah, so if you want to learn more, definitely just come connect with us right outside of that room, and we could show you all the things. Open source and inner source.
Right, and Brittany, you at least are part of the OSPO, right, at Fannie Mae. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to talk a bit about, I'd like us to just explain what you kind of guys do in your OSPOs, in your jobs, what an OSPO is, and we'll try and cover that off. I think that's important.
So I like to look at our open source program office as a cornerstone within the entire enterprise of best practices for vulnerability management, compliance, reusability of code, community building, and all sorts of different structures there. It's a really large job that has so much value and so much importance to it, but open source program offices are notoriously very small. And so we get pulled in so many different directions to try to just justify that this is the best way to do things and the best way to develop. And it can be very tricky, but it's worth it. Oh, yeah. So,
That's great.
what else would you like to talk about?
Elspeth, do you want to add to that, or Peter? What you got?
So I am not in my company's OSPO. My OSPO leads and my open source developer advocate is sitting in this room. So I am kind of the beneficiary of all that they have done for the open source, but I'm also helping them what I actually need as someone who wants to contribute to the open source world. So I think it's very important for you to help your OSPO as well, not just demand things from them.
So I wanted to sort of kick things off by talking about a bit of a view I have from FINOS on banking technology and go through some charts. And then I'm going to throw it back to my esteemed panelists to comment on these. But I'd like to talk about what I think is a sort of a crisis that's starting to form for finance technology. And hopefully at the time we'll have some, at the end we'll have a bit of time for questions and you guys can comment on whether you see this as well. But these are some trends I've spotted and I wanted to throw up and try and get us to think about. So this is a chart by Epoch AI of like the size of AI models going on at the moment. And this is a logarithmic chart, right? So this means that this is increasing exponentially. So we've got, on the one hand, we've got the size of AI models increasing at an exponential rate. So that's the first data point I want to put in front of you. The second one is, this is EU regulation, right? And this isn't an exponential chart, but you can see that every year the amount of regulation that gets written increases at a greater rate than the previous year. And we're in America, we can laugh at the Europeans, but it's actually kind of the same for America as well, right? The amount of regulation is still...
This is logarithmic. It's not.
So this is stuff that we have to deal with in our jobs, right? We have to handle all this kind of regulation. This is the number of packages in NPM per year. So this is like, and now as OSPO people, we're kind of dealing with the open source. The amount of open source that's available is increasing, I guess, at an exponential rate as well. This is CVEs per year. And well, you can see the way this is going, right? This is another problem for banks. And then this is the number of software developers that's available. You can spot the difference, right? This one's sadly not increasing at an exponential rate. Okay, so first of all then, thoughts about that, Peter? What do you got?
So many companies look at open source like they look at mostly from the risk factor, which is good, but you shouldn't only look at from the risk factor. Many of the things that Gab was talking about, part of his keynote, is actually doubling down that it's not only about the risk all the time. But yeah, you have to think about the risk, you have to think about the CVs, but you always have to look at what is the benefit for you. Many of the numbers he has been quoted, we actually see in part of our day-to-day work. We contributed back, we get kind of free riders from the community. Many cases happening, we are able to work together with partners, otherwise it would be much harder, no needs of NDAs, redlining and so on. So it's actually much easier to work together as part of it. So yes, when we talk about open source and open source readiness, most people, yes, supply chain, yeah, we do that. It's much, much more than that. And when I say much more, it's much more than just the security and the risk factor. So you always have to look behind these.
Yeah, Elspeth, what do you, sorry, yeah, I was just trying to predict which way you go there, but do you see this problem in your job?
I think everyone does. I mean, the amount of time we're spending fixing CVEs is not going down, and it's not going to go down. There's more and more of them. We need to get clever about how we fix them, and about how we address this. And it's not, there's the technology side of it, but there's also the messaging side of it, that every time there's a major CVE, we hear the same thing coming from our senior management. It's like, why are we doing open source if there's this many problems? So you're also back to, you have to make the same case again. You have to be very clear about what the benefits are and why we are doing this. And it's going to be a continuous thing. This is not something that is going to go away. The more open source we have, the more the more vulnerabilities are just going to come up. And I think we also have to be very clear that just because we're using open source, we have a responsibility to help fix these as well. This isn't like, well, this is someone else's problems. This is our problem.
Yeah, and Brittany, would you go for it? You just comment.
Yeah, so I also do think that one of the biggest risks that we do face is the lack of education around open source. I think that is one of the biggest things. So all of a sudden we're talking about CVEs, we're talking about exponential curves, we're talking about all of these software developers just thrust into this world and they don't know what to do, right? And so then all of a sudden a CVE pops out, whose problem is it? And it just gets very, very concerning. So I think one of the biggest risks and the most important thing with open source and open source championing is education from the top down all the way through.
And
as we know, closed source doesn't have CVs. No, that's not true, but we kind of pretend here that it does not.
Probably just because people haven't found them yet.
Yeah, because we don't know about it.
So we'll probably hear a lot at this conference about how AI is kind of the answer to everyone's problems. And
It's cool.
right, Peter doesn't want to go anywhere near this. Yeah, so, but I mean, yeah, I kind of look at that exponential increase in AI and think, is this going to make vulnerabilities worse? Is this going to make the amount of regulation worse? I kind of, how do you see that going, Brittany?
Does somebody else want to go first?
So it's actually very multifaceted. When we say open source and AI, we can either speak about open source models. Open source models need different licenses. You need to have different understanding. It's many cases much harder to understand whether there is something not intended in that model and so on, model poisoning and so on. It's a lot of topics too, and many of them are brand new. We not necessarily have the tooling for that, so yeah, we have that part. On the other hand, yes, developers using AI to write code. We, instead of having AI slop in Instagram messages, suddenly you have AI slop in code. Is that good? Can you review it? Yes, you can use another AI to review it, but does that kind of defeat the purpose? So we have to look at back one of those charts showing the developer count and everything. Yeah, we need more developer being able to not only code, but understand what coding with AI means. I think that's one of the big problems we are facing here. Many companies embrace the AI coding, but not necessarily understand what AI coding means yet.
I'm gonna give a somewhat controversial view here.
That's why we like this discussion.
I don't think AI is particularly different from any other new tooling that's come out. It's, it comes with a set of benefits that we can make use of and will be very useful for our developer community. But it also comes with a host of problems, and we need to figure out how we deal with them, whether it's the fact that AI is learning off open source, and there's a whole host of regulatory questions, licensing questions about how AI gets its training data on code. Are we going to replace developers with AI? Probably not, for the same reasons. Someone needs to understand this, and someone needs to look at it. But these are the same kind. I think these are very similar questions, very similar concerns that have been raised about other types of revolutionary code in the past. She said, showing her age.
A few years ago, it was containers solving everything. Now it's AI.
It's true. Yeah, and so we're just really heavily focused on delivering fast. If we look back at the past 5 years and we saw the business, the scary business, dumping tons and tons and tons of money into the development side of house. Now, 5 years later, how many of you is the business asking questions? Where did all this money come from? And what is it doing? Did anybody not get asked that this year? Lucky. Never mind. But so, we're just trying to deliver so fast, particularly around the lines of AI, but there's so much risk involved and there's not a lot of similar patterns of controls and governance. And that's something that we really need to align on, regardless in the States, the EU, Asia, whatever we need to do. We just kind of need to put a common pattern there too.
Yeah, and I think one of the talking points I wanted to get to here was, from my view at FINOS, I think we've talked about like risks and controls here, but from my view, it seems like a lot of our open source projects are becoming risk and control frameworks. We have things like the CCC project, AI governance framework, even the open source readiness project itself is a risk framework. We talk about the risks of different stages of maturity in open source and what you gain from it and what you lose from it and the activities that you have to have in place. And so I'm starting to think that as we move forward, problems like this, that we see these exponential curve kind of problems, we have to work together in open source and we have to use the idea of open source risk frameworks in order to control for this kind of thing. This is my observation here. Elspeth, it was great to see on stage today how RBC are involved in all sorts of open source contributions, right? But is that something where you see in the future? And is that where you imagine you'll be contributing?
Me personally, or as an organization?
Well, I'm using the royal you here.
The royal we. Well, we are the royal bank. Yeah, I mean, I think for the industry, the same as with the initial early open source conversations, when it comes to things like cloud controls and AI governance, we are all having the same conversations again. So I think it does definitely make sense for us to pull together as an industry, and just particularly where we are going out and talking to technology companies and technology bodies, if we can come with a coherent message and a coherent set of requirements, it makes our positions much stronger and it makes it much easier for them to deal with as well. So yeah, I think this is something we're going to see more of, for sure.
I just really want to comment that I love the word coherent in that as you're writing all of these things. So I think that that's very important to take note of.
We try to dunk this ball. So, Rob, have you ever written something about risk first?
We'll get to that, Peter. I'm being stitched up multiple times in the same...
Yeah.
All right, so before we throw it over to the questions, can you collectively, the royal you, give some ideas on how do you see your firms reacting to these challenges? All these challenges we've faced here, how can your firms use open source to try and address these?
You want to go first?
Yeah, so, compliance, all CVEs, AI adoption, risks, frameworks, all of that. What I'm finding out now is that we have written strong playbooks. And what I'm seeing in our development community is a thriving need for community. Right? People want to start working together. People want to start just driving change. Inner source and inner source collaboration is huge within my organization right now, and it's changing the way that we will develop. And that's really exciting. We have all these challenges, but at the base core of it, it's still software. The company owns the software, but we're humans. And I think that we need to continue to just keep partnering together and know that the software will be there.
I will say something that goes against what Gab was saying as part of the keynote. So he was speaking about moving from readiness to now understanding the ROE. So I'm still saying you should start, or if you haven't done so, continue and so on, join the OSR calls, because we feel like that how the world is moving, AI is one of the examples, but there's many other, and the number of CVs, we still need open source readiness. It might be a different level you are trying to be ready for. You might be moving from, hey, I have been using open source, now I'm contributing now, open source is part of my firm strategy. You know, you might have your chief open source strategist now reporting to the CTO directly because it became such an important part of your firm. So we feel like that our journey on open source readiness is still haven't finished. Yes, FINOS as it is able to move from readiness to the ROE. I feel like OSR still there, still has to exist, and we still have a lot to say on this topic.
So I just want to go back to something that Brittany said about inner source. It is so important. It's, you know, the way that we solve a lot of these problems, the way that we make open source work, it's all about collaboration. It's all about getting your developers to work together. And when we were talking last week, we all got together to kind of figure out what we were going to say. And I think, Brittany, you made the point about this is not my code, this is our code. I think that's such an important way to look at it. You know, we need to get the culture ingrained for sharing and working together and collaborating on the company's code, and also taking that out. You know, then open source becomes a much more natural evolution of what you're doing. You're just doing the same thing, you're doing it more broadly. So for me, inner source is really key to this.
Nice. And I think, Frank had some great charts today about the value of open source contribution. And I think we've, okay, so there's the OSR booth. Have you changed the order of these? There's the OSR booth. You can go talk to Brittany later on about this. I'm going to show up the quick calls to action and then we'll have some questions. So think of your questions. This is the report that Tosha and Daniel and I wrote. This is another view on the value of contribution and how this can reduce costs and risks within your organization. And really, this is talking to the value of those higher maturity levels of the open source readiness work. It's saying you should be at the high maturity and contributing back to get the most out of open source and to see the most benefit.
It would be really useful if someone wrote a book on this.
A lot of it's funny you should mention that because
it is.
A lot of those charts that we've just seen came out of a book that I've recently written. So here's a bit of shameless plugging. But has anyone got a question for my panel here about open source?
I just want to say one last thing too about the OSR. We're actually really fun people, so you're definitely going to have fun. So join us.
Despite this panel, that's the.
What are you talking about? We're peppy. We're doing good.
Yeah, who here works? Oh, I'm going to come right. You guys hold that microphone.
Hey there. Question, you said earlier that people question open source usage because of vulnerabilities that appear. Is there a remediation period, maybe internally or externally or both, that you can kind of point to and say like, hey, we resolved this quickly, don't worry about it?
Quick. Resolve it quick. If there's a vulnerability, it's impacting multiple different applications. We do have a 30-day SLA. So, generally from there, but as an open source program office, we have to do all of the testing, all of the vetting, everything for the patch, push the patch back down to the developers level, then they need to upgrade. It's a really lengthy process that we have to do really quickly, but yeah, patch it quick, and then you won't get bothered.
I just want to add there's this other set of problems that we just recently saw when NPM managed to get poisoned packages in some ways. So that's the other thing. You can introduce like a 24 hours or 72 hours like waiting period, like a cooling period. Something pushed out, you don't onboard it for 72 hours because you are waiting to make sure it's okay.
And I think, again, communication, like we have all these processes in place, but then the stuff's all over the news, or, well, maybe not the news, but all over magazines and websites about, this huge thing, this huge bug that's going to destroy all the NPM code. And it's sensationalized. And that I think is what drives a lot of the questions. But having an OSPO in place who is able to kind of front that and make sure we have the right processes and the right controls, it's super important.
And my point back to closed source. So yes, your closed source component might have as many CVs. You just don't talk about it that way because it's not coming from open source that you look at one thing, you are looking at 20 different vendors. Yeah, open source is also not one thing.
And partner with your threat detection and risk teams. They are the best. They're the ones down in the basement digging all the things out. Your TDR friends, they're the best. Partner with them.
My question is kind of related to that. I work in an OSPO at Capital One, and one of the challenges of our OSPO is being pulled into every single thing that has to do with anything that spells something close to open source. And we're feeling the pain of being stretched thin and trying to do other work to protect the enterprise. When do you start to push your cyber partners or other areas of the company to take a more active role in supply chain management, supply chain security, and that kind of thing?
I feel bad. Engage with them early on, writing things up. So why as an OSPO do we have to be the ones to vet the package, put it in Nexus, have the developers go and pull it down? You need to partner with your BSO partners, your AppSec partners, your DevSecOps partners. Like, they need to be engaged. The OSPO should write the framework, get the partnership involved, identify the risks of these people not being involved. And so therefore, if you get pushback on that, you've done all of your work. And then you can then let your leadership know, this is what's going to cost you if we do all of this.
And also going back to the OSR website. So if you go to the OSR website, there's a view where you can see all the articles based on role. So if you are a developer, if you are a CISO, if you are a security role, and so on, we have a view where you can see each of these per role and try to get them read those documents, because that's really tailored for their view, only the information they need to know. We try to keep it short and so on. So, and we have actually worked with companies who use these documents to form their own internal policies. We do have a contributed policy from some of the companies. That's one by one. Yep, you guys were one of the companies. I don't want to name companies here, but there were multiple companies. So you can kind of copy out the policies and everything as a start.
Hello. I don't have a question. I have
I can't hear.
Yeah, I have a comment on the slides. The slides look like 500,000 software developers who entered the workforce this year. They contributed to the OSPO. So these guys.
Yeah. Can we just fire them? I get it.
The second thing is maybe there should be a lag indicator, because obviously they did not get to use even before that. The second one I have is the seating count is primarily being contributed by closed source software, not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So open source is the one which makes a lot of noise and makes a lot of traffic. It is not the open source software which is contributing the license and comments. My third comment is
Sorry, what's the last one?
I have a cool t-shirt.
You do. Oh, two of you.
Anyone for another question? We've got time for water. No, is that it?
We're in the booth outside, yep.
Yes, so come to the OSR booth, staffed by...
Because we're just going to keep on talking about this stuff forever.
Yeah, we can't stop. All right, thanks very much, everyone. I hope this has been helpful. Yeah.